many people have come to know you from the healing videos you posted, and that's really led to a lot of opportunities to speak all over the world in churches worldwide. So can you tell us a little bit of a brief history for those who are not familiar of your journey from sort of pre-theology student to now?
Okay. There's a lot, but I'll try to keep it short. So a lot of people know me for like a lot of my healing stuff. But back in the day, I'm sure you already know my story a little bit. Like, I was born with only one hand. And so I struggle with, were you aware of that?
Well, I did see that in one of your videos. It was the only video you talked about it. And I like, for those who aren't familiar with that story, to hear about that too.
Yeah. So, if people want to know, like, my story, they could check it out. I was interviewed by the 700 Club, several years ago. So, I was born with one hand, and so I grew up in a very, charismatic kind of church. And so my whole life I was trying to seek healing. Going to all these different miracle crusades. I wasn't into theology very much. I was just a simple kid going to church. And then when I was about 17, I reached a turning point in my life where I went to this crusade and had a high expectation, and I didn't get healed. And then I just stopped believing in that stuff. I found a lot of this stuff kind of weird, because my whole life going to a church that believed in healing, I didn't see any miracles happen. I was very skeptical. And at the same time, that was when I was 17, that was the same time I started getting to theology, even before I went to seminary school. So I was getting into something called apologetics, which is like an intellectual kind of defense of the Christian faith. It's basically how you defend Christianity against all the other religions, trying to prove that we're right and everyone else is wrong, pretty much. And my mentality at the time was that not only did I criticize other religions, but I was very critical of even Christians that were doing healing, because of my own lack of healing in my experiences that I had growing up. And so I was really into that kind of intellectual kind of Christianity, very critical. I'll debate with people all the time. And but yeah, prior to all that stuff, I never really questioned anything until that experience for me. I wasn't mad at God. I was more of just like saddened, because I was like, well, maybe miracles don't happen today, and maybe I was deceived my whole life, So that led me on an 8-year journey of kind of like a Christian skepticism. I was very skeptical of all the miracle claims from charismatics and Pentecostals and stuff. But then after 8 years, I met a man who was miraculously healed that I just couldn't explain away. And long story short, I was so persuaded by it, I went on my own journey again of revisiting this whole idea of healing, reading all the books that I used to read, reading books that I've never even heard of from guys that were supposedly respected by, this kind of community. And I just started to believe it again for the first time after 8 years. And I started praying for people, and just instantly seeing people get healed, like, faster than, like, during the 8-year period, I would pray for people as a pastor, and I didn't really see anything, because I was very skeptical too, and, so yeah, after that 8-year period, I just started doing healing, and everything changed. And so I went, during that time, if they want to know more about my background when it comes to church, I was born and raised in fundamentalism, so I grew up in an Assemblies of God church. I taught apologetics at a Presbyterian church. I served as a pastor for several years at a Southern Baptist church. I was an evangelist at another Pentecostal church, and I was a missionary to the Philippines. So I've pretty much been around when it comes to the whole evangelical Christianity deal. So I don't know if I answered the question well.
Oh, you did, and you brought up a lot of other questions, which I'll get into later on. But I want to talk a little bit about your latest book, which I finished reading last night. Yeah. And I really, really enjoyed it, and I'll tell you why. It's probably one of the most honest books I've read about religion or the spiritual experience in a long time, from someone who calls himself a Christian. In fact, it's probably the most honest, because you have sort of dispelled a lot of the myths and a lot of the doubts that people have, that maybe they've thought about but wouldn't dare say aloud. And you kind of talk about that in the book too. Yeah. Sort of about, people are getting scared to even question their faith. But let's talk about the book. First of all, what is it called for those who have not heard of it?
Yeah, it's called So You Thought You Knew, Letting Go of Religion. That's the title.
Excellent. And how churches reacted to this book, because it's pretty controversial.
I'm sure you know the answer to that one. Yeah, so of course, a lot of people, they're not too happy about it, especially like the bigger institutions, especially in other countries that I'm aware of. And but of course, I've seen a very positive response, because I think the generation now is a lot different than my parents' generation, where I think my generation right now, we're like more into like, especially because of the whole internet thing, you could find out stuff on your own now. You don't just have to listen to the pastor or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's been mixed. It's like very opposite extreme reactions to it. So it's either like a love or hate kind of deal. And to me, that's kind of like a good thing, because it says something. I know a lot of people who actually read the book, some pastors, and I really have to wonder if they actually read the entire thing, because some of the criticisms that they say I never brought up, I actually did bring up. So it makes me wonder, but I think a lot of it has to do with it's a loss of control, because now I'm getting people within their congregations to think, and I'm not trying to like, wreak havoc and cause division. That's not my point. My point is for people to just finally be honest with themselves. But yeah, the reactions have been both positive and negative. And tomorrow's my first day for my book tour, and it's going to be at a church. And so I haven't spoken about my book at all until tomorrow. So that's going to be my first one. And then, so yeah, all the other times that I've spoken at a church have nothing to do with my book in the past. So.
Well, I mean, are there any churches that you spoke at before, you're invited to speak at before, who don't really want you to come this time around?
That I'm not sure. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, because even when I was speaking at some churches in the past, I would mention my book in some of my messages. That I'm writing a book. Some people have told me that they were wanting for me to come with, do meetings with them again in 2014 this year. I never heard back from them. So, but I can't. I don't know. I would just like be speculating. So, I mean, who knows? I don't know, because of my book, but I have lost a good number of people in my life. Unfortunately, that not just because of this book, or just because of my teachings in general, but even the first day of the release of this book, I've had people who associated with me from the beginning, who literally the first day of my book was released, they didn't want to be associated with me anymore. So, and these are Christians. Were you warned ahead of time by some those close to you that maybe you should rethink about whether you need to write this book or even release it? Well, those people who are starting to distance themselves from me, surprisingly, I never heard anything from them prior to that time. We're not like really close, but like these would be people that we would be endorsing each other on each other's websites. It's kind of like quote unquote partners or whatever. But no one has really told me not that I could remember right now. No one's told me not to write. In fact, a lot of people have told me to write my book, because it's been on my heart for years. In fact, I started writing my book back in 2010 when I was still a missionary to the Philippines, and I already was sharing like some pretty radical stuff to them when I was preaching like what we would call like a radical grace, like this unconditional love message where God loves, embraces all people, and so during that time I was writing my book, but when I almost finished my book, literally, I was almost done with my book in 2010, I had more radical shifts, and that was the time I started questioning the doctrine of hell and all that stuff. So during that time, people were concerned about me questioning, but I was still eventually going to pursue writing a book about it, because it's so important, like all these doctrines that I mentioned in my book about hell, and it really does shape your life as a Christian, of how you view the world. Like if something bad happens, you'll blame the devil, or if you do something stupid, you'll be afraid you're going to go to hell. So that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is because it really does shape the way you view the world as a Christian, So.
Well, you mentioned a couple interesting things. One thing in the book, like you've mentioned, you did actually question hell and its existence and what it really means. But you also talk about what it means to be a Christian. Now, in the book, one of the first things you say is that when you ask people to describe God, they may start all right, but then they sort of fumble. So, what about if you were to describe what Christianity is to you as you know it now? Like, would you describe yourself as being Christian? What's your definition of Christian?
Yeah. So if someone were to ask me if I'm a Christian, it's hard for me to answer that because it depends on what that person's view of a Christian is. And I know for a lot of people, at least here in America, it's like a view of a Christian is someone who's very intolerant or, bigot and very judgmental. They're against homosexuality. They're pro-war, all that stuff. For me, I don't know if I fall in that category. So, even if I were to give the cliche answers about like a Christian is someone who follows Christ, I'd still ask like, what does that mean though? Because I follow the teachings of Christ the way I understand it to be, but I don't limit myself to just studying stuff from Christian teachers. You know what I'm saying? So it's like typically when I was back in the day when I was actually my whole life, it's like I would be following the Bible, and then everything that's not called Christian, I would reject it. But now these days, I don't even call myself a Christian, but I could if I want, if I try to explain what I mean. But I don't just limit myself to just like the teachings of Jesus or the Bible. I try to discover truth wherever it's found. So if I could embrace something that Gandhi said, or Buddha, or whoever, or even there could be some positive stuff in the Quran, surprisingly, I'm just willing to admit that I was raised in the Christian tradition, and I don't deny that, so I'm very familiar with it, at least with the evangelical tradition. But I'm also willing to step out of that box and also be able to explore other traditions that in order to discover truth that could be able to be coherent with what I believe as truth. Because it's hard for me to label something Christian or not because it's very subjective. Everyone's definition of Christianity is so different, especially when you have 30,000 plus denominations. I'll just say, what kind of Christian is that? We can't even agree with each other. As you can tell, like if my book is, contradicting so many of the Christian beliefs out there that are so-called Christian. This is just my experience of how I understand things. So whether or not I'm right or wrong, as I mentioned in the book, this is just my journey growing up as a Christian.
Well, you also had a shocking confession in your book that although you're a pastor, you actually don't read the Bible every day.
Oh no, that's not true. I'm surprised you brought that up. Honestly, I don't. I know that sounds really bad. I don't acknowledge that to a lot of people when I preach at a church because obviously I usually have a Bible in my hand. I don't. I love to read. I don't remember the last time I picked up the Bible, and I know that could sound bad to a lot of people, but I do. No, because I try not to be. It's not even I try not. It's just I just don't. I have Bible verses still memorized in my head. You know what I'm saying? And I used to read the Bible, as you read in the book. Like I used to read it just to read it because I would feel so bad. It's kind of like just to get rid of your guilt. That you're supposed to read it as a pastor. So I read it, and I got nothing out of it, but at least I read it. So you could just get rid of the guilt for the day. And that's how much I was so stuck in legalism growing up. But I do appreciate the Bible. I'm not the type that I've seen, a lot of atheists. I've seen a lot of people who are ex-Christians who just throw away the Bible. They say the Bible's garbage, and it's just filled with violence. Obviously, they're not taking the Bible very seriously because the Bible, in my opinion, is not totally off. As you've seen in the book, I do believe that there are some good treasures in there, but there's also some things that I do find problematic, and so we want to take it and read it as objectively as much as possible. And so yeah, I just don't read it sometimes because I just don't feel like reading it, and if I feel like reading it, I'll pick it up.
Right. And now you actually questioned a lot of things in the Bible. We'll go over those a little bit later, but one of the things I thought was really interesting that actually attracted me to your videos was I watched the first thing I thought myself when I ran across your videos, which is basically about healing and how you can heal yourself. And I was thinking, when I saw that you were a pastor, I'm thinking to myself, what you mentioned that most people think of Christian, I'm thinking, oh boy, it's going to be one of those kind of videos. But when I watched it, I noticed that you brought in not only Bible truths, Bible scriptures, but you also brought in very secular things, even just quotes from movies and whatnot to make your point. And I thought that was really interesting. So what do people think about you mixing the sort of secular truths in with scriptures? How has the response been when some of them could very well be described as metaphysical? In one of the videos you said, don't be afraid of my verbiage that I'm using. How do Christians, traditional Christians, fundamentalist Christians respond to you mixing these sort of metaphysical quantum physics thoughts? Yeah,
and so it's been, like I said before, it's like both positive and negative. It really, like, people don't, when you watch my videos, of course I'm speaking at a church, but I do try to speak the language of the audience, or I try to just stretch them just a little bit, but I do try to speak the language of the audience. So if I'm more of in a traditional church, I'll really tone it down. If I'm in a church where the pastor, obviously if a pastor invites me to speak at their church, they must be familiar with my content, of some of the things that I say. So I do tend to ask for permission, or, can I say whatever I want? Are you familiar with my teachings on this and that? And if they say, Josh, say whatever you want, then I tend to say whatever I want. But for the ones that tell me, the kind of like the background of the churches, where some of them are more traditional, I do tend to keep the language very Christian-y sounding, And so the one where you saw how to heal yourself, that's to me, that's more of a progressive type of church community. And I'm actually speaking there again next month, and it's weird because when it's a big crowd, of course you can't please everybody, and so you'll have people who say, I loved your teaching because I used to be a New Ager, but I gave up New Age to become a Christian, and now you showed me how you could bring the two and two together. And then you have another person who says, you're preaching, your stuff is total antichrist. You're bringing New Age teachings in here, or secular ideas and stuff. And for me, I think that's the problem, is what people do, is that they try to make these distinctions between the secular and the sacred, or the holy and unholy, or whatever. To me, like I mentioned before, truth is truth. I'll stay away from the New Age language if it offends people to some degree, but I try to push it just a little bit just to show people that, hey, some of these people who are considered new age or new thought, whatever you want to call them, they have some truths that we have to be open to, And so I'm trying to, in a sense, bridge that gap, because, like I said, there's been too much of this us-them going on, and I want to show people, hey, don't be afraid to read books on metaphysics or things that have to do with New Age, or just something that's very different from traditional Christian theology. So I just learned that I can't please everybody. So I don't try to totally speak exactly what people want to hear, but I try to push it just a little bit, just to stretch them a little bit, because I want them to grow. And at the same time, I try not to push it too hard, because I still want them to hear me out. Because the moment you just get all crazy and you speak a totally different language, it scares people away. And they don't want to listen to anything that you have to say after your couple of sentences that just, makes them uncomfortable. So I try to play by ear, whoever the audience is. So yeah.
Right. Well, we'll talk about stretching. In your book, you actually, one by one, you question everything from hell to the need for even a physical church to exist. And also, you even question some of the things that are the foundation of Christianity, like whether God really did send his son down to be sacrificed amongst other things. And, what moment in particular, though, led to that total change in tune from following Christianity sort of to the letter and reading the Bible so that you could kind of wash the guilt out for the day to where you are spiritually today?
For me, it would probably just be, it's just so, it could be cliche though, but it's like, to me, it was just love, honestly, bro. It's like, my whole life, man, I don't feel like I've been living as honestly with myself as much as I could have, because my whole life, I would hear things at the pulpit, I would read things in Christian books, and it just didn't make sense to me at times, but because it didn't make sense to me, and these are like non-Christian, how do I explain it? It's like, the moment I started to understand unconditional love, everything changed. Like, I started to see God in other people, even when Christians would tell me that God is not inside a non-Christian. But the moment I saw God in other people, man, it just really changed everything, And then I saw on how, quote unquote, dark the Christian world can be when you start to disagree with them, with people. And I'm not trying to scapegoat them. I'm just trying to share my experience of what happened. The moment I started to question a lot of the teachings that I was taught growing up, just all hell broke loose. And I saw how nasty people can be. And it's not even just among Christians, I'm sure it's everywhere, but it's just my own experience about how many friends that I lost and just all that stuff. And people, just once again, just thinking about how many denominations that we have and the different interpretations of the Bible, I'm like, there's something wrong here, when everyone's claiming to have the absolute truth on things. It's like we're all contradicting each other. So I just thought to myself, maybe we got some things wrong, not just in interpreting the Bible, but just as any human being, we all make mistakes. So why couldn't the authors of the Bible make mistakes too, which is normal, because there are people that were bound by their culture and limited by their own time, And so I just started to follow my heart and just realize, like, man, all these years I look back, I used to study a lot of philosophy and stuff, and I used to actually read a lot of books on atheism that actually made sense to me at the time, but I didn't want to acknowledge it because I was scared to admit that they made sense. And so what I would do is I would read all these books on Christian apologetics and, how to defend my faith, just to reaffirm what I already was supposed to believe, because it's what I was supposed to believe, but then I wasn't being true to myself, And so I can't say it's like one moment. It was a journey for me. Because I'd always have these thoughts at the back of my head, like, dude, that doesn't make sense to me, but I'm supposed to believe it as a Christian, And so I like I said, it's just a process of just learning to let go and learn the truth and discover the truth and just continue to learn. It was very humbling for me because you see me now, like if you watch, I'm pretty chill, Usually I'm just like chilling and just sitting down on a chair talking, but back in the day, I was very dogmatic, very in your face, like, you better do this, you better believe this if you're a real Christian, and blah, 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 very legalistic. So a lot of people are really surprised of how I ended up. Of course, a lot of people are actually happier because, the ones that I used to judge in the past are a lot happier of how I am now because I'm not as judgmental as I used to be, So it's definitely been a process, man.
And there was even a time you mentioned in the book when you would be open to talking to different religions, but really your secret agenda was to sort of convert them into Christianity.
Yeah. It's sad. It's really sad. It was very disingenuous, just like my approach. I mean, I did that every week, bro. Like, I used to, I was like the hardcore. I was even talking to my wife about that yesterday. Like, I would go to all these different universities every single week. Like that, it's not my school. Like, I was still a seminary student at the time. Every Thursday, I would go to different colleges, universities, just to evangelize as many people as much as I could. And I remember I would meet some amazing people, but I just had my agenda, because they were going to hell in my view at the time, And now I see things differently. So I'm just as passionate now, if not more, as I was before. But I think now I'm more humbled because I realize, there's so much for me to still learn about other cultures and to hear their story that I don't know why they ended up believing the stuff that they believe. Look at me, growing up as a Christian who claimed to supposedly have the truth. Look how much I've had to unlearn even within my own tradition. So I just needed to take a step back and realize I'm not as smart as I thought I was.
Well, we began the program talking a little bit about the fact that healing was one of the ways that really opened up a lot of doors for you. But you mentioned that in your book there was a point when you started to wonder if the only reason people were really interested in you, or maybe inviting you to their church to speak or becoming friends with you, was because you had these gifts. And it's been a while since we've seen sort of newer videos of healing. Is there a reason for that?
I mean, just the only reason is just a simple one. Just because I've been focused on other things, like writing my book and then speaking on other topics other than healing. So it's nothing like big, you know. I still do it. I mean, I'll be speaking in San Diego tomorrow, and then the pastor last night told me that there's people that are going to be coming to do healing. So whether or not that's recorded, I mean, I still do this stuff all the time. It's just not being posted online, you know. Because I teach a lot of the same stuff all the time, so I wouldn't want to be posting the same kind of content all the time, pretty much. So, but as you know, even in my book and in my videos, I'll kind of put it in quotes about like healing gifts, because I believe that everybody can do what I do, you know, and I think that's something that's been on my heart, for Christians to understand that you know, people would put me on a pedestal in the Philippines and here because they think that I'm unique, and I'm not in that sense, you know, of when it comes to healing. It's something that everybody can do, but I was concerned about that, you know, for some time, especially when you're new to a country who doesn't really know you except for that whole thing about me, because I do healing, you know. And when I would have very shallow conversations, it's just like, how many miracles happen at your church? I mean, I would literally I'm serious, bro. Like, I got connections pretty well once I got to the Philippines. Like, I got hooked up with meeting some really well-known guys in the scene. And the first thing, bro, that they would ask me, one of the first things would be like, how many miracles happened at your church last week? You know, and honestly, bro, like, it's cool that they get excited, but in the long run, those things ultimately don't matter to me. In the long run, like, ultimately, you know, for me, it's like, what I was concerned about were the relationships, that they would get to know me for me. So it's cool. You know, they're into healing and all that stuff that I do, but deep down, I just wanted to know, you know, would you be cool with me just because of just who I am as a person? You know, where you get to see my flaws, you get to see my weaknesses, you know, or is it just, are you just interested in me speaking in your church? And because I've had opportunities, man, where I'd be like doing these healing services, and after I speak at these churches, you know, I bounce, and then that's it. They don't keep in touch with me after that ever again. I'm like, man, these are a lot of these churches that I was, you know, quote unquote connecting with. It was very shallow, like the relationships, you know, and I would do some of their dirty work for them, honestly, because it's like, there was, you know, I won't mention any names, but like, I was part of like speaking at some of the most well-known churches in the Philippines, and they would like have these undercover pastors that were understanding this message of grace that I would be preaching, you know, because I started from the ground up there, like grassroots, you know. And I was just doing my own thing, sharing, and some of these pastors would get a hold of this message, and they would be too afraid to preach it at their churches, so they would have me do it. And then after I would do it for them, you know, they would hardly even keep in touch with me anymore after that. And I'm just like, wow, you know, it just got very shallow for me, bro. And I don't know if I'm asking for too much. I was just looking for real relationships, because it's very easy to get caught up into the celebrity scene and, you know, who's a cool pastor, you know. To me, that's all. I mean, that's just BS. It's just BS to me. Like, I don't really care about that stuff. You know?
Right. Well, let me ask you one more question about that, and then we'll move forward. You know, you mentioned that you're not special. You are just like anyone else, and people can heal themselves. One of you have a really great series of videos which I encourage people who are interested in that sort of thing to check out. That's on YouTube. Yeah. And you have it kind of divided up in 10 different sort of mini videos. Yeah. But without going into the details of how to do it, I did have one question about that. Yeah. And one of the things you say in it is that someone needs to get into the feeling place of having already healed themselves or having already healed that person. How do you do that? How do you get into that emotional state where you feel like, okay, it's a done deal. I've already, I've already healed this person or made them taller like you did in those videos, or that sort of thing.
Right. Well, there's different ways, of course. It depends on the person of what would actually work for them. And so, like I mentioned in the video, it's like, because we're all concerned about the technique, right? It's whatever technique will work for you, whatever will build you up to come to that point. So some of the ways that I mentioned in the clips would be like speaking words. Like sometimes, like I'm sure we've all done this, like when we're discouraged, we would speak positively just to kind of build ourselves up. Like the new song I just came out called Happy, because I'm happy. My wife sings that a lot now, and sometimes when you're feeling down, you just say something, and then all of a sudden you reach a quote-unquote a state of consciousness where you just feel it. Right, so words can be one way. Visualization could be another, like through meditation, where you're saying something in your mind's eye, or even just going crazy and just doing some sort of action, just doing something. So there's different ways that you could actually do it. And so for me, it's visualization, speaking words, listening to something that just all of a sudden I hear a message that just all of a sudden you just reach this state of just awareness where it just feels so real for you at this moment. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because the feeling, I think, is the main element that people are missing. That when people read stuff like the law of attraction and all that stuff, and I'm sure you're aware of, it's like they'll try all these different techniques and like, oh, I prayed, or I said in Jesus' name, or I visualized and nothing happened. And then that's the problem. It's not your words. It's not your thoughts that create the healing. It's faith, and faith is usually evidenced by how you feel. And so I just use the feeling as just like an indicator of just showing that's probably a genuine faith that you have it now. Like if you tell someone you're rich, you have nothing to worry about. Don't worry about you're not going to struggle financially. Blah blah blah. If you keep saying rich and rich and rich and rich and rich, and you don't feel it, then you don't believe it. You know what I'm saying? When you feel it, you believe it. So how do you get to that point? Like I said, you could be watching something, you could be listening to something, you could be saying something with your words, or you could be visualizing. You could be visualizing someone handing you money, or whatever. So there's just many ways. It just depends on the person. Whatever works for you. So if you want to sound all Christian-y, according to your faith, be it unto you. Yeah, so it's not a one. Okay.
You talk... go ahead. Okay. Now, you talk very lovingly a lot about your wife in the book, and you've done quite a bit in the videos I've watched as well. Now, how much of her support and her love really has a lot to do with the success that you've had and the happiness that you've had in your life?
Oh, man. Everything, man. Of course I was good. We've only been married for, it's only going on for the third year, this month. So we're actually celebrating our anniversary next week. And so we're fairly newlyweds in that sense. So, I was already, quote unquote, having a success with all these things prior to meeting her. But to me, just meeting her, just life is so much better, especially after a lot of the stuff that we go through, sharing this kind of message that we share to the Christian world. When I first met my wife, we actually got together after 2 weeks. I fell for her like after the first day, and I wanted to get with her, and after 2 weeks, I just asked her, would you like to be with me and all that stuff, and I just said, if you're gonna be with me, are you ready for the stuff that you're gonna have to endure for the flack that I get for the message that I share? Because the crazy thing is, I met my wife at the time that I wanted to leave the Philippines. And I didn't mention that in the book, but I was getting so much criticism from the churches, from the mega churches, and the rumors that would be spread about me through even text messages, because text messaging is big in the Philippines. And people would be calling me like a cult leader or a false teacher. And then all of a sudden, that week, I wanted to go back to America. Literally, I told people I'm going back to America. I've had enough, and I'm still single, so it was really hard for me, coming to an empty home and hearing all these negative voices in my head from all these churches. And, I didn't have a big church, and as you saw in the book, I stopped going to church, and then I met my wife that same week that I decided to go back to America. And obviously I did have stayed in the Philippines for a couple more years, and she's just been like a huge joy to me, bro. Just a big support. Like she's tough, man. Like when she reads like my nasty emails, she gets more pissed off than I do. I'm kind of the chill one that tells her to calm down. So it's really interesting, and how just to have someone by my side to just remind me that I'm not crazy. Like all the times when I would like be hearing all these negative things, and well-respected people condemning me, or people telling me that I'm going to hell, and then my wife would just say, Josh, she would always say that to me, Josh, I know your heart. I know your heart. Even when I was dropping her off at work today, she was just saying, you're going to have fun with the interview. Just like, it's nice having that, man. If I was home alone, just all this stuff that's going on, I honestly, I don't know on how I would take it. Would I be okay? I believe so, because I believe that I'd always be okay no matter what. But it's just a joy to have my wife with me. It just makes life a lot funner.
Well, you talk about her so lovingly. It brings up the subject, as a pastor, and you mentioned a little bit of this in your book, but, you run across all kinds of love. What is your personal view about gay marriage and homosexuality?
Oh man, I've never gone public with this, bro. I've had so many people ask me this question, but I've never gone public with it. Should I answer this? Okay, let me tell you.
Okay.
My views changed so much, man. And like when I was in the Philippines, and I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's very common. Homosexuality is very common in the Philippines. And we had gay friends. In fact, one of my closest friends is actually gay. And my wife, my best friend growing up was also gay too. And these are wonderful people. And to try to keep it as simple as possible, I just leave it up to them to choose whatever they want to choose. And I don't understand how all this stuff happened. I did born that way. Honestly, I don't know. But to me, no matter what, man, I accept them. And I don't judge any of them, honestly. I don't judge any of them. To me, I love them. Anybody. In fact, the one who married us, my wife and I, she was, she lived a homosexual lifestyle in the past. She doesn't do it now for whatever her reasons, for her own convictions, but no matter what she chooses, I would still love her no matter what. And I wouldn't tell her to stop doing it or whatever, because honestly, I don't understand how all that stuff is. We're all different. We're all unique. If there's something that leads to a destructive lifestyle, then I would say something. But I do know people, surprisingly to Christians, they don't understand. There are people out there who live good lifestyles, who love people, who quote-unquote love God, and they're living that lifestyle. So who am I to judge them? I know I'm going to take a lot of flack for that. See what you did, buddy? Maybe we should go public with all this stuff. But yeah, man, I just accept all people. No matter if they're not hurting anybody, if they're not hurting themselves, why not? Yeah. So that's just my personal view, bro. That's just and there's a lot of Christians who will disagree with me. But honestly, I just don't buy a lot of the stuff, like all the criticisms that I've heard against gay people, man. Like my gay friends in the Philippines are just some of the most loving people I've ever met in my whole life. And they've been through so much hell from the Christian church. Why should I add to that? Why? That's my thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Well, my last question for you is a big deal for Christianity, and that's the topic of Satan. Now, you question your belief of Satan in the book, and you stop short of saying that he doesn't exist. But what you do is you do actually pose a question: if people blame him for things that they're responsible for, is that really the responsible thing to do? So, what is your personal view of who Satan is, and whether or not he really is the way that most Christians view him or it or her to be?
Right. Well, that's a big thing, man. Surprisingly, I've questioned the doctrine of hell for a while, but for some reasons, when I question Satan, that pisses off people even more. For whatever reason, if I had people even walk out of my teachings during the time that I would teach, they would walk out because they're offended. So it's hard because it's like that's why I'm hoping that the people who hear this interview would be able to at least read the resources that I recommend in my book, because obviously I'm just getting people to question it, but there's a whole other way to understand Satan, or with the article the Satan in the Bible. So I mean, when we think about Satan within just popular Christianity, we just think of a fallen angel who's tempting everybody in the world. But when you look at scholarship, even today, there's a whole other way of understanding Satan and the devil. And for my quick answer would be that Satan, if it's not limited to just being a fallen angel, which I believe to be very little support for it to be in the Bible, but that's a whole other issue. But my understanding would be why can't something satanic be something like the dark side of humanity, or fear itself, or the ego, or destructive behaviors, or people who are like hooked on drugs. It's like they're dealing with their demons. Why can't we look at it like that? Especially within our culture. And so I tend to believe that we tend to manifest the way the Satan works is like it manifests according to our culture, the way we understand the world. Like if I go to certain parts of the Philippines, or if I go to Africa, it's going to manifest in all these like kind of like crazy monster, those crazy demonic manifestations. And I've been there and I've seen all that stuff. Not in Africa per se, but even in America, seeing people manifest all those crazy things. But usually, as I've noticed within this Christian culture, it's depending on the mindset of the community. It tends to manifest according to the mindset of certain individuals. And we do have this whole idea of the collective consciousness of how we are as a people, of the ideas that we have. I mean, you don't see like an atheist manifest demonic activity. Why not? Because they don't believe in demons, But a Christian would come back and say, well, because the devil, already has him, but the devil is, wants against the Christians, So they come up with these really interesting theologies that, for me, I just don't get into those kinds of things anymore. That kind of mindset, and whether something is a fallen angel or not, I do not deny the reality of evil in this world. There's a lot of sick and twisted things that I've seen. My thing is that I'm posing in the book is that I just get a bit tired of people scapegoating the devil all the time, because I've seen that firsthand of people in high positions in the Philippines and in America, after they've fallen into quote-unquote sin, they blame the devil. And I just find that very irresponsible of them. Maybe it is. Maybe there is a fallen angel that's like tapping them on their shoulder. I don't know, but to me, I just don't like the whole blame game going on. And I just would want people to take more responsibility. And it just makes this world a better place when we just stop talking about monsters and demons. And, I think it's like my whole life I was afraid of demons. I saw stuff when I was growing up. Like growing up in a charismatic church, people saw demons all the time. People see demons on walls and blood coming out of the mouth, and people getting choked at Bible study. But those are happening, believe it or not, those were happening at the times when I would be teaching those kinds of things. And so if people want that kind of lifestyle, for me personally, I don't. And my life now is just so much different, where it's so crazy because I don't even think about the devil at all. Like, I don't. Like if a problem happens, I don't think about it's the devil. Maybe I'm deceived, but if I was deceived, I wouldn't know it, right? So I don't know. All I know is that my life's better now, and I take full responsibility for the things, my choices that I make, the things that I put in my mind, that are probably bad ideas, and I end up living it out. Whatever it is, I take full responsibility for it. And so that's just where I'm at on my journey now. Who knows? Who knows what I'll end up believing 5 years from now about the devil? But it could be not just an angel, but it could be structures and institutions, that are just controlling people, controlling the masses, and so I don't just want to limit it to it being a fallen angel. I think we need to make it broader, our understanding. So